The shape behind the door. On the quiet edge of Bramblewood City stood an aging residential block made of pale gray concrete, the kind that looked permanently tired. Apartment 405 belonged to Ethan Rourke, a 32-year-old night shift security guard who had grown used to silence, loneliness, and the rhythmic hum of fluorescent lights. Most nights ended the same way. Ethan entered the hallway, fumbling with his keys, and as he passed his neighbor's door, apartment 404, he always felt something strange. A feeling that someone inside was listening directly at the door, holding their breath. He never heard talking, never saw movement under the door, just presence. The man who lived there was known only as Kells. No one had ever seen him in daylight. No one had spoken to him longer than a few words, and no one could remember the sound of his footsteps. Ethan convinced himself these thoughts were nothing more than late-night nerves from too many horror podcasts. He told himself the chills creeping up his back were stupid. Then one Thursday night, the power went out in the hallway, and Kell's door was open, just a crack. Just enough to see an eye watching him.
Ethan froze, his heartbeat thundering inside his ears. At first he thought the eye belonged to a shadow or a trick of the emergency lights. But no, someone inside apartment 404 was standing perfectly still, gazing at him through the gap. Everything okay in there?" Ethan whispered. The eye didn't blink, didn't move, didn't react at all. He hurried into his own apartment, slammed the door, locked all 3 locks, and stood with his head pressed against the wood. He didn't hear footsteps. He didn't hear a door closing. He only heard silence. A few minutes later, something knocked on his door. Not a neighborly knock. A slow, deliberate tap. 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 Ethan held his breath, terrified that if he made a sound, the tapping would turn into something worse. After 30 excruciating seconds, the sound stopped. He waited an hour before looking through his peephole. No one was there, but across the hallway, apartment 404's door was shut tight.
Over the next week, Ethan began to notice things. Little things. At 3:11 a.m., every night without fail, someone in the next apartment dragged something heavy across the floor. Afterward came a whispering, too faint to understand, too rhythmic to ignore. Ethan tried sleeping with earplugs. Didn't help. He tried white noise. Didn't help. He tried pounding on the wall. That was a mistake. Because when he hit the wall, someone on the other side hit back. Once, hard. A deep, resonant knock that rattled the picture frame above Ethan's bed. He didn't sleep the rest of the night. The following morning, he went downstairs intending to complain to the landlord, but the landlord, a frail man named Malcolm Hawes, turned pale at the mention of apartment 404. "Kells doesn't handle visitors well," Malcolm whispered. "You'd best leave him alone. Best not to bother him, especially at night." "What's his first name?" Ethan asked. Malcolm hesitated. "I don't know. There was no lease on file, no paperwork, just a cash envelope dropped in the office mailbox every month. Something felt wrong. Deeply, profoundly wrong." 3 nights later, Ethan woke up to the sound of someone knocking, not on his door, somewhere higher above him,
A frantic, muffled pounding, a woman's voice begging. "Stop! Please stop! Someone help!" Ethan bolted upright. It came from apartment 506, the one directly above Kells. He grabbed his phone, sprinted into the hallway, and heard the voice again. "Please! Please! Don't!" Silence. The hallway lights flickered violently, buzzing like hornets trapped in glass. Then they steadied. Ethan took 2 steps toward the stairwell, but froze. Halfway down the hall stood a tall figure, dressed in dark, dusty clothes. He wasn't facing Ethan. He was facing apartment 506's door. His posture was unnaturally straight, arms rigid at his sides, head tilted just slightly to the left. Ethan blinked. The figure rotated his head, slowly, mechanically, until his gaze locked on Ethan. It was Kells. His eyes were sunken, impossibly wide, with pupils that seemed too large for the surrounding white. His skin looked stretched, almost waxy, like something imitating a human face without understanding how. Ethan whispered, "What did you do?" Kells smiled, without teeth. A tight, impossible smile. Then he lifted one finger, pointed directly at Ethan, and the hallway lights died.
Ethan ran blind, slamming into walls, grabbing at darkness. Behind him, footsteps paced at a slow, deliberate cadence. Not hurried, not frantic, almost patient. Ethan reached the stairwell door, and it opened before he touched it. Someone was on the other side. He pivoted, sprinted down the hall, dove into the elevator, and slammed the closed door button over and over. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the doors began to slide shut, agonizingly slow. And through the narrowing gap, Ethan saw Kells standing at the opposite end of the hallway, staring at him, without moving. The door is sealed. The elevator shook, descended. When the doors opened, Ethan bolted into the lobby and out onto the street, not stopping until he reached the all-night diner 3 blocks away. He stayed there until sunrise. At 9 a.m., exhausted and trembling, Ethan returned with 2 police officers. But when they reached the 4th floor, Ethan's heart dropped. Apartment 404 was gone. Between 403 and 405 was only blank wall. No door, no frame, no outline of where a unit should be, as if no apartment had ever existed there. "What kind of joke is this?" Ethan shouted. The officers exchanged glances. "There's no 404 in this building," one said. "There never has been. Some buildings skip the number." "That's not true. I've lived next to him for 9 months." The officer sighed. "Sir, there is no number between these doors except the ones you're pointing at." He pointed. 403. Blank wall. 405. Reality felt like wet paint smearing under Ethan's thoughts. He tried searching online. No record of anyone named Kells living in Bramblewood. No social media. No public records. As if the man had never existed. But Ethan knew what he'd seen. That night, despite everything, Ethan came home. He sat in the center of his living room with every light on, a kitchen knife clutched in one hand. Midnight passed. 1 a.m. 2 a.m. At 3:11 a.m., something scratched his door. Slow, delicate, like fingernails. Ethan didn't move, didn't breathe. Then a voice whispered from the hallway. "I never left." The power died. A shadow moved beneath the door. Ethan backed away, stumbling over furniture, trying to reach the window. His phone flickered on, one new notification. Camera detected motion outside your door. He opened the feed. The hallway camera showed an impossible image. A door where the blank wall should be. A door labeled 404. And in front of it stood Kells, face inches from the camera, smiling that same stretched, unnatural smile. Then Kells lifted his hand, and the camera crackled into static. A moment later, someone began unlocking Ethan's door from the outside. One lock clicked, then the second, then the third. The door swung open.
Ethan didn't remember collapsing. He didn't remember being dragged. He didn't remember the needle or the whispering. He only remembered waking up in complete darkness. He staggered to his feet. The floor beneath him felt uneven, concrete broken in places. A narrow sliver of yellow light seeped under a doorway ahead. He pushed it open. What he saw made his knees buckle. It was a hallway. A long, narrow hallway lined with dozens of doors. Some wooden, some metal, some rotted, some brand new. Every door had a number. Some had stains beneath them. Some pulsed as if something behind them breathed. And far at the end of the hall stood a familiar figure. Kells. His voice echoed, distorted. You live next to them long enough, or long enough lives next to you. The hallway lights flickered. A door opened by itself. A human hand dangled out of it, limp and pale. Kells pointed to another door. Yours. Ethan backed up, shaking violently. Let me go! You already went? You went the moment you looked back. The hallway groaned, stretching wider, deeper, as if the building itself were inhaling. Then the door labeled Ethan Rourke, 405, swung open. Inside it was not a room, not a cell, not a space that should exist. It was a spiraling tunnel of darkness, throbbing like a giant throat, lined with the echoes of screams swallowed long ago. Ethan tried to run. Kells placed one cold hand on his shoulder. Welcome home. And pushed him in.
3 weeks later, apartment 405 was listed again. New tenants toured the building. Young couple, recently married, looking for a quiet place to start a new life. As they approached the 4th floor, the hallway lights flickered. The landlord apologized. It happens sometimes, he said. They passed a door marked 403, then another marked 404, then 405. The wife pointed at 404. Oh, I thought this building skipped that number. The landlord hesitated for a fraction of a second, then smiled politely. Must be remembering wrong. Inside apartment 405, the couple commented on the faint sound coming through the wall, something like whispering. Who lives next door? The husband asked. The landlord swallowed. A man named Kells, quiet fellow, keeps to himself. The couple nodded. They didn't notice the cold draft seeping from beneath Kells' door. They didn't notice the smell of dust and old iron. They didn't notice the faint shape of an eye watching them through the peephole. Kells never looked away, and he never blinked.